What kind of diet are you on right now, Chris?
Uh, that's a complicated question. It's just evolved. Right now, it's basically just as many super high quality foods that I can without grains.
Okay.
So mostly just fish and vegetables.
Cool.
But lots of cheating.
Yeah. There's always some cheating.
Right now, it's pretty low carb. It changes a lot depending on like how much I'm working out. Turns out that carbs are really useful for working out. But if you're just being completely sedentary, then carbs are not good at all.
I don't know. I kind of feel like my brain runs directly on fruit.
Mm.
You don't have carbs.
If you train it to do that, then it does. Yeah. If you get off carbs, you'll find that your brain runs better on fat.
I tried that this week. I tried going into ketosis this week, and it was.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it did not work that well for me.
You gotta get past it. You gotta get past the withdrawal.
How many days did you give it?
I fasted for 42 hours, and I was thinking of you, Chris. I almost messaged you. It was the first time I fasted. So I fasted for 42 hours, then I was in ketosis, and then I stayed in it for 3 days.
Cool.
So
What kind of fats? What
So that's
sources
like
were you
5
getting
days
fat
total.
from?
Yeah.
Wow. With no food at all?
No, I was in ketosis for 3 days, and I only fasted for 42 hours.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What were your fat sources?
Mostly meat and some vegetable. Like I ate some vegetables, and I guess that's carbs, but.
I don't really count vegetables as carbs unless it's like a starchy vegetable.
There's some carbs, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll knock you out of ketosis if you have enough, like even the low carb stuff. Even the low carb vegetables. I've never actually done like a ketosis. I've only done like a don't eat grains and potatoes type thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I've always had like very trace amounts of carbs, except when I didn't eat for 3 weeks, obviously.
You really have to cut it almost all out to get into ketosis.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah.
I found that I was able actually to get out of ketosis pretty quickly if I didn't eat really high fat meat. So for example, if I ate a lot of protein, your body can convert those proteins into sugars, and it's called gluconeogenesis. And then after your body does that, you can actually pull yourself out of ketosis by eating too much protein. At least that's what I found for myself a few years ago.
Yeah, you totally can. Because amino acids can be converted into glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I found I couldn't think as quickly, which makes sense because like the body processes it metabolizes glucose more quickly. Your cells metabolize glucose more quickly than they metabolize fat. It was really slowing down up there.
Yeah, it prefers to, in the presence of any glucose, your body will burn that first, and then only after that switch over to fat.
Right.
Yeah, I'm describing the effect of when I went off, mostly went off carbs. I don't know if I was in ketosis for the whole time, but I went off them for like 30 days. And if you like maybe the second week, I would say, is when you start to notice that your brain is functioning better again. Because it basically is just like, well, I guess I'm not going to have any sugar, so it has to switch over to ketones, basically.
Were you still consuming like fruit and vegetables?
I was eating vegetables, but not fruit.
Okay.
I guess I went full paleo for 30 days. That's how I started on my food adventures back in 2014. I was doing CrossFit, and the CrossFit coach was like, you should try paleo. And I was like, okay. So I tried it, and it's this 30-day challenge. And you just cut out grains, legumes, dairy, processed food, alcohol, added sugar. You're not supposed to eat a ton of fruit. I didn't eat any fruit because I was just like, whatever, I'll go all the way. And yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
So basically I was just really cloudy for the first few days. And then after, maybe like day 6 or 7, I noticed that I started becoming sharper again.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I tend to differ from the mainstream paleo diet is they tell you not to eat a lot of fruit, but I mean, if you think about an evolutionary diet from the perspective they're coming from, we evolved out of Africa, which is a really warm weather climate where there's a lot of fruit, sweet fruits everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't really shy away from that too much, especially if you're doing a lot of load, right? If you're doing a lot of workout kind of stuff, because obviously you need energy from somewhere. And most of the stories that I've read about like elite top level athletes, especially endurance athletes, you can do pretty good on a ketogenic diet, but if you really want to get a peak elite level of performance, you have to have carbohydrates, because it's just as simple as that's the fuel that your body uses in an anaerobic environment. It doesn't really use fat very well. So you know, to get peak athletic performance, you really kind of need at least some carbohydrates.
Yeah, I would agree
Not
with
that
that.
I'm a peak athlete by any means.
And I would also argue that carbs are also useful for what's it called? It's CrossFit, like interval training. You know, high intensity interval training.
HIIT.
I think that's super high intensity because that's also going to be anaerobic. And I did. I started paleo in June of 2013, I guess is when I started it. And then I started having problems with my back like 6 months later. And I can partly attribute it, I think, to not eating any carbs while doing CrossFit. I think you like eventually, and also I wasn't resting, and I wasn't, I was driving in my car for 100 miles a day, and I was just generally not taking care of myself. But I have noticed that if I don't eat carbs and I'm working out all the time, I don't heal as quickly. And I don't, I also don't have as much gains, basically. Like I don't make as much progress.
Yeah, I was thinking, like to respond to Anthony's point about the actual Paleolithic diet, including a lot of fruit. Like I was thinking this week, like it's a very like the paleo diet, it's a very like kind of male conception of like what the Paleolithic diet was like. Because like if like the males were like out hunting, they were like probably eating more meat and like going into ketosis on a regular basis, whereas like it seems like the females were probably like eating more nuts and berries. I mean, I don't know, like there was like definitely sharing of food, but it occurred to me, just a thought.
I tend to conceptualize the paleo diet as a very broad range of foods. It can consist, if you're Inuit, for them it consisted of like 80 to 90% animal products, like whale blubber. They even had something they called high meat, which they would bury like liver or organ meats in the ground for months at a time. They would let it ferment and then come back and literally eat like rotting meat. And they called it high meat. Apparently it does like all kinds of crazy things for the body. I've never tried it. Seems a little bit far out there, but apparently for them, they like it. It's really good. But, in other, other versions of paleo diet, yeah, you could be eating 90% fruit, 80% fruit with like maybe insects or, just a little bit of meat. Insects, I think, is something that we really should be eating that we don't. And I would like to, if I could just find, insects somewhere. I know it sounds gross.
I'm sure we did eat more insects as hunter-gatherers. But back to Ariel's point about how paleo is a male conception. Actually, when I first tried paleo, I was like, everybody needs to try this. It's the perfect diet, and then I started just experimenting and figuring out basically which things actually were giving me problems and which things I could safely introduce back in. One of the things was dairy. Like Rob Wolf is the main guy who wrote the paleo book, got everybody on board with it, wrote the 30-day paleo challenge, and he's lactose intolerant. So it makes sense for him to say like, oh, dairy is unhealthy for you because it's unhealthy for me. I mean, it's just unhealthy for him, and a lot of people are lactose intolerant and they don't even realize it. So it makes sense for those people to limit dairy, but it didn't make sense for me because I got rid of it for 30 days. I completely got it out of my system, and then I started eating milk and cheese again, and I didn't feel that at all. It's a different story with grains. Now, the reason I bring that up is because I've talked to a lot of women about like eating meat and eating fish, and they talk about like, especially like vegetarians or vegans, a lot of them will say like, when I eat meat, I actually physically feel bad. And I'm like, well, I can relate to that, except not for meat. That's how I judge which things are good for me. And, I have that with grains. So, I don't eat grains because it makes me feel bad. And so I'm almost wondering if, like, you know, maybe there is like a biological difference where women prefer less protein or less meat, and they prefer more, you know, more plant matter. I don't know, but it just seems to me to be a trend that like on average women dislike meat a lot more than men do.
I would tend to agree with that. Like, you know, just guessing here, I'm not a biologist by any means, but that does make a lot of sense. And it does seem that women seem to tolerate veganism maybe a little bit better than men do. They seem to do a little bit better on it. Part of, I know when people go vegan and they feel really good at the beginning, you know, you can go without food entirely for 20 or 30 days, like we talked about last time. Ultimately, right, there's certain nutrients I think that we're getting in meat that are beneficial for us. But another way I think about it, we talked about cooked meat, you know, raw fish versus cooked meat. The way that we prepare our meat a lot of time is really toxic. Like in Texas, you know, we're king of barbecue over here, and it's delicious. But man, every time I eat barbecue brisket or whatever, I get the itis. You know, I get super sleepy. You know, right afterwards. And if you think about it, if smoking is bad for your lungs, right, then why is putting meat into a smoker for 3 or 4 hours and then putting that into your stomach? That's probably like a really bad idea. So in terms of not eating meat, I think a lot of it comes down to quality. And for me personally, I try to get a lot of raw meat, basically like sushi or steak, you know, just give it like 20 seconds on either side. And I've noticed that if I eat consistently heavily cooked meat, you know, over the course of a few days, I start to feel sluggish. Just don't digest it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely get like that with protein too. If I have an excess of protein, like, which I do, you know, occasionally, I'm just like, I love all the meat. Like there's this Argentinian restaurant. Actually, there's like 3 Argentinian restaurants in Guadalajara, which are like my favorite Mexican restaurants. But like they all have this like amazing, they all have like their particular cut that they like specialize in. And this one has this amazing beef rib, and it's like so juicy and fatty, and like, you know, sometimes I just eat lots and lots of meat, and I do feel it like catching up with me after a while, you know, and then I have to kind of, you know, it feels good to cut out protein like entirely for, you know, a day or two, and then I go back to normal programming.
There's these like few foods that are like the problem ones, right? Like there's dairy, red meat, grain. What else? There's like a few that seem like to be especially reactive to people, and it's not clear whether they're universally bad or whether it's more an individual thing.
Oh, I would definitely
think it's individual.
Yeah.
Because like for me, I thrive on lots of red meat. I don't eat as much as I used to, but yeah, I have maybe a pound of steak every day, and I feel great. But if I were to cook it heavily, like if I were to cook it even to medium and eat it that way, I'm sure it wouldn't be nearly as good, because again, that whole cooking process, you're denaturing the proteins, you're changing the fats, you're actually creating some carcinogenic materials in the process of heating it. And I think that's one of the things that people detox from when they go vegan or vegetarian, is they detox from a lot of that crap and they feel great. You know, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I've definitely tried a lot of, you know, sort of different diets, and one that includes a lot of red meat for me personally works really well. But again, I hardly cook it at all, which was hard in Mexico overseas, because a lot of their meat is like, it's really hard to find high quality meat there. I can go down to Whole Foods and get, you know, a thick grass-fed sirloin steak and feel like, hey, I'm not hurting the environment. This cow lived a happy life on grass. You know, it's been eating insects, etc. Whereas in other places, like usually their process isn't as good in terms of how cleanly do they kill the animal, how well do they keep it refrigerated. I just felt like it was hard to find high quality meat, like in Mexico, for example.
Yeah, it is really hard to find high quality meat here. It's possible, but it's, you gotta pay a little bit more. And I wanted to touch on something that you said, where basically I think that some people who do detoxes feel really great afterwards, and so they pretty much detoxing from anything is like that. You know, if you've been doing something every day for a long time and then you suddenly stop doing it, chances are you'll go through this withdrawal period of, you know, a day somewhere, you know, a few days, something like that, and then you'll feel great. So I think there's a tendency to kind of be like, oh my God, so, you know, that thing that I was doing was terrible and I should never do it again. And it's like, well, you know, maybe, or maybe you were just doing it too much, you know. You know, maybe it's okay to do in sort of not every day for years and years and years, but it's, you know, like once in a while.